Sunlight streamed through the lofty windows of the opulent kitchen, bathing the honeyed walls in a deceptive warmth. The mansion stood regal, refined and flawless from the outside, yet beyond its polished doors hid a tale no one could envision. On that radiant morning, the stillness of affluence was pierced by the anguished cries of a young girl. Kneeling on the gleaming oak floor, her small hands pressed against the wood, a silver pail upended beside her, its water flowing like sorrow across the surface. Her gown, once a tender shade of azure, clung to her trembling frame as she sobbed. My hand aches terribly. Her delicate voice reverberated through the corridor, but only one person stood nearby. Someone who should have soothed her, yet instead gazed, almost delighted by her distress. And at the entrance, footsteps drew near. The man of the house, a figure of dominance and control, was about to witness a moment that would alter their lives forever. If you cherish kindness, redemption, and the power of compassion to heal shattered hearts, please pause to like this video, subscribe to Kindness Tales Stories, and share your reflections below. Every heartwarming tale we share carries the hope of reminding the world that love and empathy are never squandered. Emma, just 7 years old, had already endured too much sorrow and silence. Though her father, William, was a millionaire, revered in corporate halls and admired by outsiders, she drifted like a ghost in her own home. Her mother had slipped into eternity years ago, leaving an emptiness wealth could never mend. In her place, another woman emerged, a stepmother cloaked in gems, dresses, and false grins. To strangers, she appeared flawless, enchanting, even benevolent. But when the door shut and no eyes watched, her true cruelty surfaced. Tasks burdened Emma's frail shoulders, and every error met with harsh words, with punishments no child should bear. That morning, while scrubbing the floor, Emma had stumbled, her hand grazing the jagged edge of a broken glass. Tears stung her eyes, not only from the injury, but from the solitude of having no one to seek comfort from, no arms to embrace her and promise it would be all right. The mansion's splendor couldn't conceal the cries rising from the kitchen. William, just back from a crucial meeting, stepped through the doorway, a leather briefcase in hand. His eyes widened at the scene before him. His little Emma crumpled on the floor, weeping, clutching her wounded hand, while his wife loomed over her with icy disdain. For a moment time froze. The contrast of wealth and anguish painted a truth he could no longer dismiss. The man who had chased contracts, riches, and triumph suddenly realized he had missed the most vital meeting of all, the one with his daughter's shattered heart. But before his return, Emma's life had been a string of endless days. Day after day, she scoured floors, shined silver, and bore weights far heavier than her small arms should know. She watched sunlight play on the marble counters, dreaming her mother lingered in that glow, guarding her. Each morning started with chores. Each night ended with silent tears pressed into her pillow. She tried to smile when William glanced at her during dinners, but he rarely noticed the marks on her hands, the sorrow in her eyes. He was too consumed by his empire, too convinced that wealth sufficed for his absence. Yet Emma craved not jewels or mansions, but love. As days passed, her pain grew. She felt unseen, unheard, unloved, though her heart clung to hope. And on that fateful morning, when the pail slipped and the glass shattered, it was as if fate declared enough. Her cries grew louder, filling the grand halls, reaching the ears of the one man who could change everything. William's footsteps echoed closer, and with each step, destiny shifted. The tension in the room swelled like a tempest. His wife quickly composed herself, masking her face with false concern, as if she had been aiding Emma all along. But the sight of blood on his daughter's tiny hand cut through every pretense, every deception, every illusion of joy he had believed. The world of opulence he had built suddenly felt hollow compared to the broken child at his feet. And as his heart pounded, Emma's words, "My hand aches terribly," echoed in his ears like a haunting refrain he could never erase. William stood rooted in the doorway, his briefcase dangling forgotten. Sunlight streamed behind him, yet the morning's brightness couldn't dispel the shadows clinging to the room. Emma's sobs cracked something deep within him, something he had buried for years in pursuit of wealth and power. He saw the blood on her small hand dripping onto the wooden floor, mingling with the spilled water. He saw her trembling shoulders as she tried to stay quiet, even in her pain, as if afraid her cries would worsen things. And suddenly, memories of his late wife flooded back. The woman who once held their newborn, telling him Emma was their greatest treasure. How had he strayed so far from that vow? For years, he had convinced himself he was doing enough. He built an empire, believing success would shield Emma from pain, believing luxury meant safety. Yet here she was, in a faded dress, kneeling like a servant in her own home, her hands scarred not from play but from toil. His gaze shifted to his wife, adorned in jewels, her crimson gown sweeping the polished floor. But her beauty now seemed empty. There was no trace of maternal warmth in her eyes, only irritation at the unfolding scene. William suddenly grasped the harsh truth. The woman he trusted to nurture his daughter had instead broken her spirit. But this story didn't begin here. To understand this moment, one must look back at Emma's lonely days. Each morning was the same, sunlight streaming through windows, but no voice to greet her, no gentle hand to brush her hair. She rose quietly, slipping from bed before others, woke, and headed to the kitchen. There, she faced tasks beyond her years, scrubbing dishes, wiping counters, polishing silver that gleamed but never brought her joy. Her stepmother stood nearby, not with praise but with criticisms that cut deeper than any wound. Not good enough. Try harder. The words echoed in her mind daily, making her wonder if she'd ever be enough. Emma endured, telling herself William mustn't know. She loved him too much, though his absence stung. She believed speaking out would burden him, that he might blame himself, and she couldn't bear that. So she stayed silent, hiding her pain, behind a fragile smile at dinner, nodding politely when asked about her day, never daring to reveal the truth. But children aren't made for such silence. Her small body bore the weight of chores and the sting of loneliness, yet her soul yearned for love. Every evening in the quiet, she knelt by her bed and whispered a prayer, asking her mother, wherever she was, to watch over her. She prayed that one day William would see her not just with pride, but with true understanding, that he'd look beyond the walls of wealth to the little heart longing to be held. That morning was different because fate intervened. The pail of water slipped, the glass broke, and pain sliced through her hand. She cried out louder than ever, her voice echoing through the marble halls, refusing to be silenced by fear. Her stepmother's scolding sharpened, but so did the cries of her soul. And at that moment, William returned early, stepping into a truth he could no longer ignore. His chest tightened as he took in the scene. Emma's tears rolled down her, flushed cheeks streaking her pale skin. The cut on her hand wasn't deep, but the sight of her blood unleashed a storm of guilt. He saw how fragile she had become, how much she had suffered in silence. And beneath her pain, he saw something more heartbreaking, fear in her eyes, as if unsure if he would protect her or walk away again. That look tore through him like nothing else. He set his briefcase down and knelt, ignoring his suit's costly fabric, brushing the spilled water. The millionaire, once commanding boardrooms, now trembled as he reached for Emma's injured hand. She flinched at first, unused to tenderness, but when she saw it was William, she let him hold her. He pressed a handkerchief to the wound, but it wasn't just the cut he sought to heal. It was years of neglect, absence, and unspoken words, and as he held her, he whispered a silent vow to himself. This was the moment everything would change. William's heart pounded as he cradled Emma's trembling hand, his mind racing with regret. How had he let this happen under his own roof? The stepmother, sensing the shift, stepped back, her false smile faltering. Her voice, sharp and defensive, broke the silence. "She's clumsy, William. I told her to be careful." But her words rang hollow, unable to mask the truth in Emma's tear-streaked face. William's gaze hardened. For the first time, he saw the woman he'd married not as a partner, but as a stranger who had wounded his daughter's spirit. He stood, still holding Emma's hand, and faced his wife. "Enough," he said, his voice low but firm, carrying the weight of years unspoken. The room seemed to shrink under the intensity of his resolve. Emma looked up, her eyes wide with a flicker of hope she hadn't dared to feel before. William's decision was made. He would no longer be the absent father, lost in his empire. He would rebuild what had been broken, starting with the trust of the little girl who needed him most. The days that followed were a whirlwind of change. William took Emma to a doctor, ensuring her hand was properly treated, but more importantly, he began to tend to her heart. He spent evenings by her side, listening to her soft voice recount her dreams, her fears, and the memories of her mother she held dear. He learned of the chores that had scarred her hands, the harsh words that had bruised her soul. Each revelation was a dagger to his conscience, but he vowed to make amends. He hired help to ease Emma's burdens, ensuring she could be a child again, free to play, to laugh, to dream. The stepmother's role in the household shifted. William confronted her privately, his words measured but unyielding. Her cruelty would no longer be tolerated. She protested, claiming she only meant to discipline, but William saw through her excuses. He ensured she had no authority over Emma, relegating her to a distant corner of their lives. Emma began to blossom, her smiles no longer forced, her eyes bright with the knowledge that she was seen, loved, and protected. The mansion, once a cold monument to wealth, began to feel like a home. William took time away from his empire, realizing that no deal could compare to the joy of his daughter's laughter. He read her stories, tucked her into bed, and promised to be there for every moment that mattered. Emma's prayers by her bedside no longer pleaded for her mother's distant watch, but thanked her for the father who had finally returned to her. The community around them noticed the change. Neighbors, once distant, began to share stories of kindness, inspired by the transformation in William's household. The tale of Emma's resilience and her father's awakening spread, a beacon of hope that compassion could mend even the deepest wounds. William, once blinded by ambition, became a man who valued love above all else. And Emma, once a shadow, stepped into the light, her heart no longer heavy with unspoken pain. Their bond grew stronger each day, a testament to the power of second chances. The mansion's golden walls, once a facade, now glowed with genuine warmth, a home rebuilt by love, trust, and the courage to change.